Now on to neuromuscular system. So the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. Nervous impulses will go from the senses where the change in environment is detected and where there is a need for a change in movement. The nerve impulse will travel down from the senses through a sensory neuron, which is where the stimulation is picked up from, and this will go to the central nervous system, in which it will travel through a relay neuron through the central nervous system, and then after the message has been picked up there, a response is put out into place and is sent down the motor neuron and to the effectors, which have the cause of triggering movement that was needed due to the change in environments which the senses picked up. The PNS stands for peripheral nervous system, and it consists of the nerves, which are in the central nervous system, and ganglia, ganglia outside the brain, and spinal cord, which can detect nervous impulses and can send and create a response, which is obviously important in the neuromuscular response, as the quicker the quicker and efficiently the impulse is delivered and transported, the faster the reaction. Sensory neurons are nerve cells within the nervous system, which are responsible for converting the external stimuli from the organism's environment, which is detected by the receptors, which could be the eyes seeing something that may need a response, for example, some movement, or hearing something which is a detection which might need a movement in response to revert away from, into internal electrical impulses. For example, some sensory neurons respond to a tactile stimulus and can activate motor neurons in order to achieve muscular contraction. Motor neurons pass on from the relay neurons and they travel to the effectors, which will cause a muscle contraction or whatever is needed due to the pickup of the stimulus in the first place. It carries the message from the central nervous system to where a response is needed. A nerve impulse is the way that nerve cells, also known as neurons, can communicate with one another. Nerve impulses are mostly electrical signals along the dendrites to produce a nerve impulse or action potential. The action potential is the result of ions moving in and out of the cell, which is important in transmission. A myelin sheath is situated around the nerve. It is made up of protein and fatty substances, which is obviously important for the electrical thermulation, which it has as a characteristic. This myelin sheath allows electrical impulses to transmit quickly and efficiently along the nerve cells. If myelin is damaged, these impulses will slow down, as it is a speeding up factor. An axon is a long, slender projection of a nerve cell or neuron, and it conducts an electrical impulse from the neuron's cellular body. These axons are in effect of primary transmission lines of the nervous system, and as bundles they make up nerves. Saltatory conduction is a factor which occurs in the neuromuscular response, which causes a fast impulse action, as it is the jumping of the impulse over the myelin sheath. This action is important in increasing the conduction velocity of action potentials. Myelin acts as an electrical insulation. It also reduces the membrane capacity, and therefore the impulse has a fast and saltatory movement as it jumps over them, increasing the kinetic energy and therefore the impulse speed. The wave of depolarization occurs in the four chambers of the heart, both the atria are where it happens first, and then both ventricles. The sinoatrial node on the wall of the right atrium initiates the depolarization in the right and left atria, which then causes the contraction, which is symbolized by the P wave on the electrocardiogram. On this slide, you can see the three different types of nerves: sensory, relay, and motor. You can see how saltatory conduction happens as the impulse jumps over the bumps in the nerve cell, and at the bottom left there is the P wave, which is a wave that is generated by the depolarization as it transmits the atria. Normally the right atrium depolarizes slightly earlier than the left atrium, since the depolarization wave originates in the sinoatrial node in the high right atrium and then travels to and through the left atrium. An action potential is another factor in the neuromuscular control of movement. It occurs when a neuron sends information down an axon away from the cell body. The action potential is the impulse which is transmitted. The action potential is a very large amount of electrical activity which is created by the depolarizing current. When a nerve is transmitted, it needs to pass over large areas or surface area and diffuse over gaps, which are called synapses. The impulse will start due to the stimulus, which will need a response to, for example, your ears or eyes will detect a ball rolling towards you, for example, in football. From the receptors, an electrochemical impulse is sent along sensory neurons to the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and spinal cord. Here, the impulse travels through the central nervous system, through relay neurons, and finally sets off down the motor neuron, which has the job of delivering the impulse to the effectors. The gaps in the around the neuron are in which the nervous impulse jumps between are the nodes of Ranvier. Once the impulse is at the stage, each nerve ending connects to a muscle, which is the effector. There is a rule called the all or none law, when it's all got to be connected to all of the muscle fibers, or none of them will contract. This is the motor effect. At the crossover by the synapse, there are small sacs called vesicles which contain a chemical straw called ACH. It is a neuron transmitter. The vesicle splits open and releases ACH, and if enough of the transmitters spread, there will be a contraction. ACH binds to the receptors on the motor end plate of the muscle fibers, and if there is enough secreted, the electrical charge is high enough and muscle action potential is created. The neurons stimulated by the sarcolemma by generating the neurons stimulate sarcolemma by generating an action potential, which is an electrical impulse down the muscle fibers. Motor units will usually vary in size because for different muscle sizes, they require different energy levels which depend on the motor unit size. For example, the muscles in your eyes will only need a small motor unit. However, for the quadriceps, which is a large muscle, a large system of motor unit will be required. For example, they'll need a big contraction from this muscle in order to kick a football in a game. As the axon of a motor neuron approaches a muscle that it innervates, it divides into multiple branches, which is seen in this diagram on the right here. As you can see, the arms are spreading onto different muscle fibers. The neuromuscular junction, it causes ACH to be released into this synapse. Fast oxidative glycolytic fibers are the immediate fibers, which are fast twitch muscle fibers which have been converted via endurance training. These fibers are slightly larger in diameter and have more mitochondria, as well as a greater blood supply and more endurance than the typical fast twitch fibers which are found in the body. A motor unit is made up of a motor neuron and the skeletal muscle fibers that are supplied by the motor neuron's axonal terminals. These groups of motor units usually work together, which form a larger surface area, which coordinate the contractions of a single muscle. All of the motor units within a muscle are considered a motor pool. A larger motor unit will work with a larger muscle, as I said, like the quadriceps, and the smaller muscles have a smaller motor unit because there's no point in wasting the energy in which they transmit. For the biceps, 580,000 muscle fibers are used, and the number of motor axons is 774, which is a very large amount. In our investigation, during the multi-stage fitness test, many muscles are required to provide a fast and efficient contraction. Some of the main muscles which are and were required were the quadriceps in the legs, which are used to propel the body forward as you run, and the biceps in the arms, which will have the same function of pushing the body forward and propelling it. These muscles will be connected to large motor units, and this is because they have many muscular fibers in which the motor unit ends will connect to, and this is where all or none law plays a role. All of the muscle fibers need to be connected in order to cause a contraction due to the electrical impulses, or it will not happen. Similarly, we could use another example of during the multi-stage fitness, looking around at the other participants just for coordination will strain the eyes, which will be connected to a smaller motor unit as they don't require as large contraction. Muscle spindles are stretch receptors which are found in the body of a muscle that detect changes in the length of muscles which vary. This can be seen in the different muscle types, such as the quadriceps. When playing netball, they could contract when someone's about to shoot their shot. So yeah, they detect the changes in length of muscle, and they transmit and send length information to the central nervous system, going by the nervous fibers, which is important because the central nervous system will need to have a idea of what's happening. The muscle spindles have both sensory and motor components, which are the Golgi tendon organ and the muscle spindle. These belong to the nervous system, and the functions to influence the movement in which it happens. For example, a backhand in tennis will use the biceps, and the different length in the muscles will show. Muscle spindles are small sensory organs with an elongated shape. They are precipitators that consist of several modified muscle fibers enclosed in a sheath of muscle connective tissue. This is important because it allows the flexibility and lack of breakage. These modified fibers are called interfusal fibers. Interfusal fibers are the skeletal